Grand Rising, everybody. And I have to say today, there's been like at least 20 times this morning that somebody has given me a smile that, like, my heart is overflowing right now. It's just so wonderful to be here in person. You know, I love this center, I love this building, I love the grounds, but it's the people, it's the smiles. Like, we have a great group of people here. So thank you, everybody. I just love to be here. Okay, this first one here, real quickly, I'm just going to talk about our guest speaker and workshop that's going to be coming up on October 20th. It's Reverend Anthony Suarez, goes by Tony, and he's also an attorney, retiring, but he was also a state legislator here in Florida for a while. He's been a Democrat and a Republican. He's all over the place. I love the guy, and he wrote a book called What's Law Got to Do with It? And he talks a little bit about how laws are formed and why, and how it relates to like religious freedom. So it'll be an interesting talk, and then a workshop focused on his book following right afterwards. So just want to put that out there for everybody because it's coming up in about 3 weeks. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly, and just everybody take a breath in a little bit. You know, with Hurricane Helene, it could be stirring up a lot of stuff. And it's just, for me, it's a reminder. There's always stuff stirred up out in the world. But seeing, like what happened this weekend, I finally, this morning, heard back from 2 friends that live in Asheville. So it's good to hear that they're all right. I know there's, a lot of people that aren't. But for me, it's just a reminder to bring it up, to just hold a little closer, love a little tighter, be a little kinder to yourself and to others around you. And, it's us, it's people. This is what's important. And, it can be fleeting. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And that being said, pieces into peace. So it's putting the pieces together. And you'll notice how pieces is spelled. It's P-E-A-C-E-S, the pieces together. So how many people, I want to see a show of hands, who has ever done a jigsaw puzzle? I think that's everybody. And so, like, how is that feeling? Like, when you've been working on it, maybe you're like hunkered in with people, or maybe you're at the Airbnb at the beach, and you get to that place where the last piece, and you slide it in and just, it's such a sense of satisfaction to put that piece in there. But like, speaking of like the Airbnb at the beach, maybe you pulled out a puzzle that somebody's done before, and you're building it, and it's fun. Everybody's involved, and you get down. There's the last piece on the table, and you're like, yeah, put it in. Like, but wait a minute, there's still a hole right there. No, where's the piece? Of course, the science of mind in me tells me that it's okay that piece isn't there. The reward was in the process. But sometimes, it's hard to forget, especially when that piece, man, I've had that happen, and I've grown since then, so that's good. I'm not like throwing the table anymore, so that's good. It's growth. It's growth. But I bring that analogy because all month long, so like in the week 1, we talked about, finding our inner peace. Creating that place that, like Linda talked about, where we can just drop into it when we need it, when we need a respite from the world, because be in that place. And then the following week was talking about how do we create peace with our individual interactions, one-on-ones. And then we took the next week into how do we incorporate that into our communities to make peaceful communities that also contribute to the next week, which is global peace and collective peace and harmony. They all tie together, all of them. So when I'm working on my inner peace, if I am currently like in a toxic job situation, that's going to weigh on my meditation practice a little bit. It's going to make it a little more challenging. And then in the same way with like my one-on-one interactions with individuals, if I'm not feeling inner peace for myself, if there's inner tension, it's going to affect my patience level, my overall demeanor. Everything reflects back. It's kind of like the spider web. You tug on one little strand, the whole thing kind of wiggles a little bit. And so that's what we're talking about here, is like putting those pieces together, kind of like that puzzle. If we want to experience more peace in our life, we got to pay attention to all these different areas of peace in our lives and let that bleed over into one another, and just making that practice in that peace. So the idea of global peace is it's a wonderful aspiration, and there's been people that have been in this pursuit for, I think, as long as human beings have clubs that they use to hit each other when they needed to take something that they wanted. And so I think, as long as that is, there's been people that have intended to make that peace. But there was a quote from Ernest Holmes last week that said, peace isn't somebody else's job. There is something that we can do, tangible, right now, individually. And that's taking care of our own inner peace and recognizing that interconnection and how we bring ourselves to interact with one another, how we bring ourselves to set that intention. I think that's a big part of why Center for Spiritual Living people, Science of Mind people, New Thought people, Unity people, they really touch my heart because there's intention. If you're here and you're listening, there's intention. You're seeking something bigger than yourselves, something within. And so, like the Karen Drucker song, we really are. We are the ones that we've been looking for. We want peace. And I know personally, most of my life, I saw it as, well, we can't have it because that person's in control. We can't do it because of that person. And we're giving all of our power away, and we're all just kind of can end up being on default and kind of bouncing off one another and just like waiting anxiously, white-knuckling for that peace. Where's that peace? But it's up to us. We are the only ones that can do it, and it starts from within. So back along the lines of where I kind of opened up with, around Hurricane Helene and the other stuff in the world, because at any given time, there's people that are hurting, people that are struggling, and I just by statistics and probability, I'm sure there's a couple people in this room that are hurting right now. We are all we have. We have each other. We're limited. We have a limited time on this planet. How do we lean into what's most important? What do we want to see? Sometimes when we have, natural disasters, that's our reminder, oh, that thing I was worried about yesterday, it doesn't mean a single thing today. And I was in a tizzy. I was all worked up. And something can happen. And in a moment, we're reminded, there's a friend. That's important. So then how do we take it into the world? Reverend Emil Govro spoke here a couple weeks ago, and something that he said that just really resonated with me is that peace is more than just the absence of war. It's more than that. Of course, in peace, war and anger don't exist, but conflict can still exist. But we can manage conflict peacefully when we choose and when we have that intention. So for me, peace is something that's cultivated. Thich Nhat Hanh, one of my favorite teachers, he said, if we want peace, we need to be peace. Peace is a practice, it's not a hope. It's a gradual thing. Every time, showing up today, especially if you're hurting and you showed up today, that's strength. That's power, that's courage, that's vulnerability. I commend you. But showing up, that's part of a practice. When you wake up in the morning and you remember, I'm going to think about peace for just a couple minutes before I get out of bed, because I forgot that I wanted to create more peace. Well, this is how we do it. We do it, little steps. The global theme, she brought up the Karen Drucker song in the theme, and then there was also a Bob Sima song that we are the movers and the shakers and the peacemakers. And in the song at the very end, there's a recording of a peace pilgrim who I've mentioned here before. She was the woman that, I think it was in the 70s, just went walking for peace, and she walked for like 30 years. It was something crazy. And she's talking, and she's like, it's a big act for one person, and I can see it's spreading the idea of peace. So one person with a big act can do a significant thing for peace. But many people with little acts of intentional peace can create huge movements of peace. That's our power. What do we want to create for the world? What do we want to see? What do I want to see for my children? Changes everything for me. So peace is cultivated. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is how do we take it out into the world? We're all here, and we're doing our individual work, and we're creating and intending to have more inner peace within. And then where the power can really come in is how do we take it out in the world? So I thought I would share a story that just about a person that I really enjoy. I love what he's doing. Interestingly enough, we had talks, and he's very atheistic. He's an atheist, and he's like, I'd like to believe, but I just can't. My rational mind can't. But it doesn't matter, because he's doing the work in the world. So what I want to talk about is like when people wake up and people start having that inner peace and wanting to see it, sow it, and be it, people in positions of power, people in positions of service, when you bring this into your other areas of your life, that's the power to change. So I worked at a restaurant in Cleveland, almost the full 4 years that I was there. And the manager that hired me, I found out when I was looking for another place to work, because I found a different job first. And I saw that this guy had just moved to this restaurant that I was interested in, and he'd been there as the general manager a couple months. I went in, the interview, I think we talked for like over an hour, and waited a week, got the job, and I worked there for 4 years. This place, by the time I left, I loved every single person there. Every single person. So, it was great food, great, celebrity chef owner, great kitchen crew, like back of the house people were nice, which is pretty rare in a restaurant. And front of the house people, like we had a great crew of people that we respected one another, we helped one another. Like, we'd have to show up at 4:30, like people would get there at 4:15 just to see the smiles on our coworkers. Like people would genuinely get excited, like, hey, I'm working with you tonight again. All right, let's do it. Let's go make some coffee or whatever. But it was such a pleasant environment. And when I was getting ready to move to Connecticut, I went to my boss, and I was like, I just got to commend you on like this situation, like your team that you put together here. And he's like, yeah. Like, I thank you for noticing. He's like, it wasn't an accident. He's like, I remember when I interviewed you and we talked. He's like, I just could tell from the conversation we had that you were a pretty good dude. You would be good here. When I came on, like I said, he was new. He'd only been there a couple of months, and there was people that had been there for years. And I remember one guy that worked there that came before I did, before he was part of the cultivation process. And we're back cutting bread, and he kind of like being funny, like kind of tells me like, I like to make them like really big pieces. That way the people have to double dip. I like to make them double dip. And like, so you're like intentionally kind of sabotaging your guests. Is that what you're saying? Like these are the people that we're here to serve, and you're making it a point to like make it harder on them. I don't get that. And throughout the time that I was there, a lot of the people that there was some people that worked there that as the vibe kind of changed, they rolled with it. There was one person that when they started was a pretty angry person. By the time I left, they were a different person. They were peace. But some of the other people, like instead of resonance, it's a dissonance. And over, like probably about a year and a half, they just kind of found their ways out. The person that enjoyed watching people have to double dip and gross each other out or whatever, he had an accident, and he had to step out of the job for a little while. And he came back, like 6 weeks later, he came back. He's like, hey, can I come back on now? And Todd's like, sorry, we don't need you. We had to fill it. And we just don't need anybody else. And, he tried again and just realized, like, he wasn't coming back in. And life has a way of doing that. We tend to gravitate towards who we are with. And sometimes we can get stuck with people that maybe aren't in our best interest, aren't best for us. And it's okay to recognize when that is. And we could move on. Sometimes people will stay, in abusive relationships out of a sense of obligation. I owe them. Maybe it's, a parent or a significant other or whatever. I owe it to them. You don't owe your peace to anybody. Your peace is to me, it's my most sacred thing. And I don't want to do anything that gives that away to another individual. And it took me a long time in life to kind of realize that. But we have that power. We have that choice. So Ernest Holmes says, we must practice the presence of peace consciously, definitely, and deliberately. If we can do it individually and in the family, and to a certain degree in our offices and businesses, which we can, why can't we do it for the whole world? And again, it's one step at a time, one person at a time. Now, I wanted to use one other, and I'm kind of like in the personal zone today, but one other personal example of that idea of peace being more than just the absence of war. I didn't learn until after I left my partying lifestyle behind. Most of you know my story. I had never learned conflict resolution until I was like 37. So I would get, in a disagreement with a significant other or something, and I might just leave. I might scream. I might do the silent treatment for 3 days. I did that. But once I learned, we have tools. We have a mouth. We can communicate. Oh, that's powerful. When I finally, figured out there's other ways to communicate other than punching a wall to show that I'm angry. It's this is brilliant. And so, but where I'm going with this, my spouse and I, we, at some point, we've made that intention. We want a peaceful relationship. We had to make a decision. Are we staying together? What are we doing? Are we going to work this out? This is, back in 2008, all around the time when we decided to shift our lives. And so we've got that intention. But does that mean that there's no conflict in our house? It does not mean that. There's conflict. Things come up. We've got children. She and I, my spouse and I, we each get busy, we get tired, we get frustrated, and conflict occurs. And sometimes we say something that we don't mean. Sometimes, I hate to admit it, I'll slam a door sometimes. I'm working on that. I've had one since I've been back to Colorado, and the wind going through the house helped, and so I was really it really slammed. And so that was my wake-up call. I'm not being peace. I'm not being peace, but I want to be peace. And so just by making that intention, when the conflict arises, by having that intention to create the peace, I can talk differently. I can, remove myself from a situation. I need a minute to cool down. I can then, think and process. And then when I come back together, when sometimes the other person or people, they might need the time too. And so when everybody's in agreement, hey, let's come together. How do we talk about what happened? I'm sorry, I didn't mean that thing that I said. And I was upset about this thing that happened. My reaction wasn't great, but how do we resolve this? and I say this, I've got a long ways to go. I am a long ways away from perfect. And that's okay, because we know perfect is not real. It's more of a direction that we head. And so that's what I really want to talk about. That's what I want to leave you with today, is that idea of cultivating peace. And it's one thought at a time. And it's one action or intentional conversation with another that truly creates peace. But it's really hard to do, especially like for me, when I didn't have the skills before that, when I didn't even know that there were skills for improving your interpersonal relations. Like, it seems pretty obvious now, but I didn't know it back then. And so that cultivation is just one thing at a time. And then, like Peace Pilgrim said, many people doing many acts can have a huge impact. So that, for me, it takes off some of that pressure. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to always be peace. I would like to be, but I know that I'm probably going to fail if I try to do it 100% of the time. But that's how it works, and that's how I can hold up space for you when you're not in your best situation, and then you'll be there for me when it's my turn to process, because that's life. It's an ebb and flow, inevitable. We're always going to ebb and flow. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's what keeps us growing, expanding, asking questions, asking what can be better, what can we do together. So learning to ask for what we want. I'm going to finish with one other thing after we'll do our spiritual principles and practices. So our spiritual principle that I wanted to talk about this week is the law of attraction. And we become that which we think about most persistently. So the law of attraction. If you want to be peace, you want to experience peace, you have to think peace and set that intention. And when you forget and when you get hung up on those conflicts, you bring it back to peace. And all of these things, like I know what's worked for me may not work for you. And that's the beauty of the universe. So, but what I have learned when I look at other teachers and things that they say, a lot of times I'll be like, I kind of get where you're going. I don't resonate with that. But if I take that and kind of see it like this, like even if something doesn't resonate, I can still find something that can twist it a little bit. So I hope that wherever you're at, when you listen to me yammer on, that don't just take what I say and say that has to work for you and then feel frustrated if it doesn't. Because we have many tools. Every week we have a new tool. And so again, it's just that process, little steps, picking out the things that work for you. And as you think about it, it causes you to act in a way that brings it to you. It also creates like weird magical coincidences that things just show up. It's pretty powerful. So that's our spiritual principle to focus on this week. What am I doing? Okay. Our spiritual principle to think of the week by cultivating what we want to see in the world. We're the only ones that can create peace for ourselves. And so that's our practice this week, is to, if you're in alignment with it, to practice, think, and cultivate that peace. And our affirmation, if I will read it once and then we can all read it together. I am the peace I see in the world. I am the peace that I see in the world. And let's do it one more time. I am the peace I see in the world. And once we see it in here, we start to see it out there. So what I wanted to finish on is, I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but it seems like we're kind of living in crazy times. Okay, I'm not the only one. Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's a wild world out there right now. There's, political divisions off the charts. There's some crazy wars and skirmishes going on. And this now is like I'm dropping into like reminding myself what I need to do this week. It's the doom scrolling. I gotta let go of the doom scrolling. That's where, you open up your news feed and You got to see the latest development because there's a lot going on out there. And I want to know that I'm going to be safe. I want to know that everything's going to be okay. And so I have to go look for that next piece of news to know that things are better. For me, I'm pulling away from looking at the news over and over. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling fearful, pay attention to how much time you're watching news, especially if you're watching like one individual source of news and that's it, and it just keeps playing through on a loop. It's not healthy for me. I know. Yin and yang, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with being informed. I'm an advocate for being informed, but sometimes I over-inform myself. And I over-inform myself on opinions of others. And back in alignment with that peace. If I want to be inner peace, when I'm looking at that news, when I'm looking at these opinions, holding thoughts of animosity towards another, I'm not being peace. And I'm not peaceful. And I'm anxious. And then I'm grumpy, and I'm irritable. That's where I'm at. And so I want to just encourage us all to be soft and gentle with yourselves. Be loving and kind to those around you. And like the Gary Lynn Floyd song, where there is hatred, I'll bring love. Where there is darkness, I'll be the light, I'll shine. I missed the middle one.
Sadness and joy. Sadness and joy.
Where there is sadness, I will be joy. It's letting go of the knee-jerk responses. When something triggers me and something upsets me and my mind's like, that idiot, that jerk, or what, that's not the energy I want. And that's why they're there, to remind me of what energy I do want. So that person's actually helping me. So if you're with me, let's start cultivating more and more peace. So we'll take that within. And just recognize that there is one infinite source of all life, of all love, of all presence, of all peace. And as I breathe, it reminds me that breath is life, life is spirit, and spirit is love with a capital L. So I know that at the core of everyone's being, all that matters is that love. And so as I remind myself that peace is available at any given moment, that I can step outside of this physical world, retreat within, and remind myself what's important to me, why those I love are important to me, and why I see the divine love and light in every individual, especially those that I find disagreement with. As I soften my approach and my estimation of others, I'm reminded of their humanity, so I can be inspired to create more peace and more harmony, if only in my thoughts. May my actions follow suit. May that love and light inspire each and every person that hears these words, as I acknowledge that there's only the one infinite mind, the one infinite light, that inspires each and every person. So I give thanks for all those on this planet who are seeking and intending, creating a more peaceful earth. I say thank you for everybody who's going within and discovering more about themselves, about their higher selves, about their presence. I give thanks for everybody out in the world who's giving a helping hand for those that are in need at this moment. I give thanks for all those who are choosing peace instead of violence. Those who are reminding one another of the good that's within each of us. So I affirm and avow that right now that love, that light carries each of us as we go about our weeks, inspiring us to greater and greater moments of peace, love, compassion, and understanding. So with one final expression of thank you, Spirit, I just release these words knowing that we are creating a more and more harmonious and peaceful planet with every thought that we have. And I affirm that that is so by saying, and so it is.